Ladies and gentlemen, my name is
Scott.
Hey, yo.
Is that his younger brother? It's gonna be
Jeff.
The cream will rise to the top. Oh, yeah.
And you're listening to
all of the great action figures from our good friends at Hasbro.
The Fully Poseable.
Have your own WrestleMania with all your favorite figures.
Wrestling Figure.
Each sold separately from LJN.
Podcast.
And we are the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Telephone. I am your host, Jeff. I am bringing you more phone calls from your Fig Lifers today. I'm hoping the show will take your mind off of things going on right now, and you get to listen to some fun stories from two Fig Lifers coming up this episode. So, let's call our first Fig Lifer.
Hello.
What is going on, Jeff? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Former host of Not Your Mama's Soap Opera and current host of Kross Rhodes. How you doing, man?
Good. How's it going? How's life treating you now in this new world?
It's definitely interesting. It's been interesting out here, to say the least. But how's everything out there?
Yeah, it's been very interesting myself, but I've been spending a lot of time and finding a lot of comfort actually collecting and just really appreciating my collection while stuck inside.
Oh, are you purchasing anything, or have you purchased anything recently?
I've been trying to. I went back and bought a bone-crushing Owen Hart after the Dark Side of the Ring episode, and I pre-ordered The Fiend, so that's still coming on its way. I haven't really been able to go, obviously, to stores hunting that often, but it's been nice really just having the time to actually like rearrange the collection and put it into more of a, just a different way to display it. I think it's really, it's something that's like really underrated to really just like take time to see what you have. I know in previous episodes, you and Scott had mentioned, that you guys can open a museum with just the amount of stuff that you have. And it's like when you really like look and curate, I say this all the time to my uncle, who's a big 12-inch G.I. Joe and 6-scale figure collector, that, if you have so much stuff, it's great to really just intake and really just appreciate all the stuff that we actually do have. So that's what I've been able to do during this quarantine.
I'm going to have your uncle and Scott talk. Scott has been on such a huge G.I. Joe kick lately that I didn't even know where this all came from, but apparently from what he said, it brings him back to the 80s where he's just sitting there playing with his G.I. Joes. So, but more power
up on you.
Yeah, exactly. More power to him, man. I mean, if that's what is making him happy right now, more power to him. So, but have you come across anything that you had forgotten you purchased?
So actually, I thought I had purchased the Surfer Sting. I think it's Elite 63. And I realized that I hadn't actually purchased it. So in my collection, what I usually do is I'm primarily a loose collector, but for certain figures, I'll go back and I'll buy their other versions and keep those versions mints on card. And I thought that was the case for Sting, but in actually looking around, especially after his Legends figure was discontinued, looking around, I was like, wait a minute, I don't have that one. So I went back and I got the Elite 63, and I also went back and picked up it's the WrestleMania 35 box, but it was for the Undertaker figure that comes with the jacket and the hat from the previous WrestleMania. So those are two pieces that I was happy to add.
So how much was the Elite 63 Sting?
It wasn't that bad. It was actually only $40. Then I paid $43 with tax and everything included.
Okay. I love that figure, and unfortunately, I saw it everywhere. But to me, that's an underrated figure.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you got the big gold belt in it too, in addition to the jacket and all the all the decorations and all the face paint, and just it really shows that they tried to get all their Sting figures out while they can, and it's really. Like you said, an underrated figure. I didn't have so much luck with the Undertaker figure because I rolled the dice and I ordered it from Amazon, and the box just came destroyed.
Oh.
But it's okay. It's okay.
So how is your collecting going? Are you collecting anything else outside of wrestling figures?
So I've been an action figure collector really my whole life. My earliest memories include collecting Batman figures when I was a really young child, and just whether it's Star Wars or Power Rangers or wrestling figures, I've really always been a collector. Currently, at least during the pandemic and such, I was looking for a Mandalorian Black Series. I was able to get my hands on one. But other than that, there hasn't really been much that I've been after. I started, looking at my old collections. I had a really large DC Universe Classic collections. Those are all sculpted by the Four Horsemen, who currently do the Mythic Legions line. So I revisited that, but nothing really. We'll see. I was able to go back and purchase a Power Rangers Zord morpher from my childhood, so that was pretty cool.
The Bandai one?
Yes, it was the Zeo one, the Red Ranger, when it's a figure and he morphs into his Phoenix Zord. It's really just a head flipper, and he has a backpack that has wings attached to it. But it's a pretty, I don't know, it's really one of those nostalgic figures. And I was looking on eBay actually the other day for the Small Soldiers Brick Bazooka figure, which was a favorite of mine growing up. His head literally flipped into a giant bazooka. Gotta love the 90s.
How was the prices on Power Rangers nowadays?
Because I got this loose, it wasn't terrible. There's never been many of this particular figure. I've been looking for it for a while, and it's rare that you find one mint on card. You do see a lot of the blue and green versions, but not a lot of the red. Power Ranger stuff, the new line by Hasbro is really terrific if you like Power Ranger stuff. And they're just bringing you finally a 6-inch detailed figured line of it, and it's done well, and it's done in scale. I kind of have like a Hasbro shelf, at least current Hasbro shelf. So I have Black Series figures, the Lightning Collection Power Ranger figures, and the few Marvel Legends that I have up here, and they're all just in scale. And I know that it's overdone, and I am in agreement that I think that scale is overdone, particularly for me in Star Wars figures. The Black Series collection is growing so large, but they're not necessarily. It's not even distribution problems or anything like that, but it's just older figures are skyrocketing in value, and they keep on making more figures. So it's like, I don't know. There's no way that you can ever really go back and create a full collection unless you have like an unlimited budget, which is not the case. So I've been like, do I dip in the well of Hot Toys and start very slowly? I know they have like different options in terms of like acquiring collections, but even then it's still a black hole of collecting that I'm not sure if I want to go in yet.
Yeah, some of those older lines, except starting lineups, man, you can pick up some starting lineups for dirt cheap. I was looking at a Jim Kelly starting lineup, and I think it was from 90, and man, it was only like $7. I was like, well, I'm gonna click and buy that right now because it's so cheap to go back and collect those, unless you are collecting Chicago Bulls stuff.
Yes, that's definitely true. And the Last Dance, I think, really spiked people's interest in starting lineups, and in particular Michael Jordan figures. I remember growing up, my cousin had a 12-inch Space Jam Michael Jordan action figure with the Toon Squad jersey and everything. I used to think it was the coolest thing. And it got me thinking about, do you remember when McFarlane did that sports run? And I never really collected them, but being in New York, my one New York team that I've always had a lot of pride in supporting is obviously the Yankees. And I've always been tempted to go back and create like almost my Yankee all-star lineup. And now, I don't know, now it's getting me, I don't know, I feel like maybe I might look more into that.
You should, man, and now's the time to do it, especially while they're cheap, because you never know when that page is going to flip, when
Oh yeah.
Figures are just going to skyrocket. So if you want to go back and get some Jeters, you want to go back and get Mattingly, whoever it may be, now's the time to do it. In fact, what's pretty cool is starting lineup. Well, I shouldn't say it was Kenner because it wasn't Kenner, but stadiums were doing stadium giveaways for starting lineups. And there's a Gary Sanchez out there. And I've thought about picking it up for Scott because it was only like $12. And so I was thinking about picking it up for Scott because Scott's a diehard Yankee fan. It's just kind of cool seeing those old starting lineups. Are they the greatest? No, not really. But right now they're affordable, so why not?
Absolutely. And the starting lineups, I remember I had a Jordan one growing up. It was I believe it was a retirement one that I still have in the box. I've been trying to hunt that down, but they're definitely nostalgic. And it's definitely, for me, it was almost like a 3D printed baseball card in the sense that similar to an LJN, but they're stuck in that pose. Mm-hmm. But it's representative of what you would see if they were on, any form of trading card or anything, like that. And it's usually that iconic pose. It's whether it's, someone hitting a home run or getting that, Super Bowl catch, whatever it might be. It's very similar to Hogan being able to do an elbow drop or, vice versa.
Yeah. The McFarlane ones are cool too. I mean, McFarlane crushed it on his sports lines. Unfortunately, they didn't move as well. There was a hotbed for him in about 2005, 2006, because he was doing a lot of variants, a lot of Brady no helmet, Brady dirty jersey. He was doing a lot of variants, and people were hunting those variants down. But I don't know, the bottom just fell out on those, and I would say about 2008, 2009, like a lot of people just were like, okay, I'm done collecting all these variants. I'm going to just stick to my regional guys. So I'm going to pick up for us Giants fans out here, maybe a Lincecum or whoever it may be. So McFarlane did a great job, and there's also a lot of Yankees for you to go and collect, especially for you Yankee fans out there.
Oh yeah, there definitely is. And there also, I remember, it reminded me a lot of the Jackson and Mattel Stone Colds with all the belts, but they did a LeBron James that had, I believe it was the year that he won the second time with the Bulls, but they included like all his titles, all his trophies, and just all his different little accoutrements. And it was just like so many different accessories that you would come with a basketball action figure. It's just so it really is a unique line. I remember especially being younger, and they had I forget the company, but it was a Ken Griffey Jr. action figure, but you put almost like armor and like knight armor on him, and there was like one from each sports league. I can't remember what it was, but it was just like this like really interesting like concept, and that's why I think I've always loved collecting and being able to make your own collections, is because you can have that creativity that if you saw something in the ring that you didn't want, you can recreate it in your own collection, and it can go the way you want.
So let's jump back to wrestling figures.
Absolutely.
When did you start collecting?
So I started collecting in 98. I was in first grade, and the famous, at least my famous story is, I really wanted a Kane action figure.
Okay.
I didn't realize that Goldust and Kane were in fact two different people. I was, 6, and I thought like the Green and the White Ranger, well, that's just his other suit. If that makes sense. So I got a Goldust action figure, not knowing any different. But still to this day, I'm a tremendous supporter of Dustin Rhodes and the whole Rhodes family. So, if I didn't think Dustin was Kane, who knows? But yeah, I didn't really collect any of the classics for no other reason other than my Toys R Us has never really had them. And at that time, that's when I was collecting a lot of other figures, including Marvel's Toy Biz run, and always different things. I really became a like hardcore, more so wrestling collector back in 2011 after the Summer of Punk. I remember hunting at 4 or 5 Toys R Us's when there were that many Toys R Us's, and finding the WrestleMania 28 build a who was that? Alberto Del Rio's announcer, Rodrigo. I believe.
Ricardo.
Ricardo.
Yep.
Yeah. And that CM Punk figure was my first elite. And then slowly but surely, just been kind of building, my Mattel collection and being able to, what I love about the Mattel collection, especially for collectors and for new collectors, and for people who don't necessarily love wrestling, you kind of get a good landscape as to like the wrestling product if you look at just different lines. I remember even like the Bruno Sammartino figure, just those throwback classic lines that my cousin, whom now basically I and the reason why he enjoys wrestling, and he's turning 14, so he's born and bred in the PG era of wrestling, but it's been great to see him interact with my Road Warriors figures or my Ricky Steamboat figure, being like, oh, who's that? And wanting to use them in video games, and just like this multi-generational facet that, action figures allows, people to really interact with.
Mm-hmm. Does he understand who the wrestlers were? Does he understand how big the Road Warriors were?
Oh, absolutely. I was able to take him to a live event at the Garden a few years ago. He's from Ohio, but when he came in, it was just the summer heat wave tour, and we had to go check it out. And it's wrestling is such a spectacle. Even I would had the pleasure of hanging out with Scott at Survivor Series from the Staples Center in 2018, and it's just such a it's very akin to just anything that's impressionable when you view it, whether it's your favorite movie or your favorite concert or just seeing one of those major sports moments. It creates that instant connection, and that was very much the case for my cousin, because even randomly he'll ask me all the time, like, well, when's wrestling on? If he's in town, he knows, like, all right, well, I'm with Jeff, we're going to watch wrestling. And it's almost this this thing that he's like, oh, well, it's cool. It's a cool thing to do. And I don't know. I feel like as a wrestling fan, not, and an action figure collector too, that those haven't always necessarily been the cool things to do. So it's it's a interesting position to be able to say, you know what, doesn't matter. If you want to go buy a Cedric Alexander figure, do it. If you wanted to hunt for the Maverick afterwards, that was one thing that I did. I'm sure you remember when there was a bunch of layoffs in WWE and furloughs because of the pandemic, and I went back and I picked up the EC3 Elite, the Drake Maverick Basic, a couple of others, just to make sure that I had a representation of them in my collection.
What's special about wrestling is that it brings people together. So like, I could go next door, and my buddy next door is a baseball fan, so he's a baseball fan, so that's cool. But if we were wrestling fans, we would have this even closer bond. And it seems like wrestling brings a lot of people together, and a lot of people also seem to resonate regarding the action figures. That also is like another special bond on top of that. So that's what I love about wrestling, because no other sport or sports entertainment has that type of thing.
Yeah, no, that's really true. The coolest thing, for me as a collector and as a wrestling fan and also as a comic book fan, is you get to see real life superheroes. And I know wrestling's been described as this so many times, but this goes to the fact that when you meet these superstars as well, they're in gimmick, they're in character, at least often. And if you want to meet anybody, they're going to be that person. In particular, when Matt Hardy was Broken Matt Hardy, I met him and Jeff at, I believe that was an Eternal Con. And Jeff Hardy was, regular, Jeff Hardy, but Matt was still in character. And it just goes to show the level of care that these individuals go in order to bring these characters to life. And for me, I've always just really appreciated that craft. And that and like those skills that go beyond the ring itself. And then it's like, not only do you get to see the Ultimate Warrior, really just take over the ring in his entrance to any match, but there's a toy of him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can see, in particular, I think of Rey Mysterio. One of my favorite figures was his entrance moment with the big Phoenix headdress. And you can just see that so many characters were almost designed in a way to become toys.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, frame of reference in mind, that's why I can't wait to get the Fiend figure, because the instant I saw Bray, debut as the Fiend, I'm like, that's becoming an action figure. It's just a matter of when. And, it's great to see those, those moments.
It's meant to be an action figure, or I should say the Fiend, that is meant to be an action figure. Just like Luchasaurus. Luchasaurus is meant to be an action figure. When you walk down that figure aisle and you look to the left and you see this big Luchasaurus figure, you're going to be like, what is that? Because that makes your eyes gravitate to it. It's just like, what is that? I need to know about that. It's like Scott and the Jimmy Snuka figure. We've told that story many times. But that's what those action figures do, is catch your eye. And you're 100% correct about that Fiend. It is made to be an action figure, and a lot of these guys are, especially when they come out with their costumes for WrestleMania, when they get all dolled up.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I know you guys have said, and Scott has said, that he prefers, when his figures are in their ring gear. And for me, it was always the opposite. I much prefer for my wrestling figures to be in their entrance gear, because it makes them more differentiated than when you see a bunch of figures lined up and they're all in tights or they're all in trunks. For me, when I see the Dudley boys, with their glasses on, and with Roddy Piper, in his kilt, or even Triple H, I love all of Triple H's figures because they all usually include his WrestleMania gear that you're able to remove.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a great thing to be able to see all the layers that, really go into each one of these figures. And for me, when you have the entrance gear on them, they stand out. When you have a Rick Rude Elite in his red standing next to the Honky Tonk Man from the Retrofest in his blue, they contrast and hit off one another similarly, to superhero costumes. But this way, it's in such a new fashion that's really, I don't know, it's one of the many reasons why I love collecting.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever set up like a figure fed, or did you ever do anything special like that?
So what I did was I actually had this federation of all my figures together that I used to call the Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I always had a champ, but it was always basically just like my favorite figure at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it would change from figure to figure. A lot of times it was that Red Power Ranger that I was talking about. For a while, it was this one Venom figure. But there was always wrestling figures in the Brotherhood or the Federation, and I always looked for Kane figures. I had a lot of bone crushing action figures because that was just a lot in the 90s. The Goldust, like I shared that story. I also had the Stone Cold Steve Austin. I had a Rock. For me, I just missed the Hasbros. I'm a little too young for the Hasbros.
Mm-hmm.
And but even now, my primary collection is my wrestling collection. And so that's, what I'm going hunting for, whether it's, pre-pandemic and just going on hunts, or even now when you're limited to sneak off when you're going for essentials.
Have you ever considered going back and look at purchasing the Hasbros or the LJNs or even the Remcos?
So I have a Hogan LJN that I bought loose.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hasbros, I've been looking at loose ones, but just being a stickler for condition and other things of that sort, I have noticed that, they definitely have gone up in value,
mm-hmm.
Really across the board. And I don't know, there's some figures that even like the newer Mattels that I seen flooding shelves at one point are now, up in value again. And I don't know what the reason is.
Nobody knows. I mean, it
just seems out of nowhere.
All this came out of nowhere, like you just said, man. it's baffling to see figures that, like the Sting Elite 63, that was sitting on our Walmart's pegs for, I'd say, about a good month, and now it's $40. So it's doubled.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what is it that's causing this? A lot of people have theories, and I love hearing the conversations that are going on around it. I've seen it on Facebook. I've seen it on Twitter, seen it on the FIGS message boards. I mean, it's all over the place. A lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people have theories of what it is. But whatever it may be, it's just hard to believe that a figure that, like you just said, was sitting on the pegs for a month or two is now worth whatever it may be, $60.
Yeah, and I mean, even before that, out here in the New York, Long Island area, there are a lot of collectors. There's always been a lot of collectors. One of my favorite action figure lines, which actually is a big reason why I was really looking forward to collecting Mattel figures, was the Dark Knight Movie Masters collection line back from 2008. And I remember that in line in particular. It was right after Heath Ledger passed away, and it was the first really 1/12 scale Joker figure that was being mass produced, and you couldn't find it anywhere. And then it wound up being, I think it was re-released once more time, but then you found up just seeing it in clearance, bins, and all of a sudden this line didn't really have any value. And I don't know, it was just one of those, I never really understood why figures, are not distributed evenly, or even if they're not distributed evenly, like easily, like how come there's not a way that, collectors can communicate with Mattel or the other, or Hasbro or whomever, in a way that, can ensure that they get them? I understand like their variants in terms of like the one that comes to mind is the Murphy, especially with the different colored tights. Like I understand those variants, and I can see why those could be more challenging to get, or the 1 in 500 and the limited releases. But for the mass produced line, like I remember there's some lines that would never even show up in stores. You would never see it, not even, and it didn't matter when you went to the store. So like it always baffled me.
Nobody knows what that is. Target and Walmart put the blame on Mattel. Mattel puts the blame on Walmart.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is too, when you walk into these stores, and it's no fault, to the stores at all, but the big box stores are not your local comic shop. So they don't necessarily see the inherent value in the product, and it makes it frustrating because where you would get a certain level of, attention if you were buying, a television or a home appliance or other, big ticket item, you don't necessarily have that level when you're buying action figures. And I think you definitely see, but it's almost like a misrepresentation, but it's at the same time, it's like, well, what is, like, how would you solve, that problem? And the distribution problems, it's always, I've seen it, but for me, I used to spend a lot of time in Florida. My family used to have a house down in southern Florida, and the Targets, you would always be fully stocked no matter what. Whereas New York, they would never be. And I never understood why, but it became a running joke that every time we went to Florida, we had to go to Target.
I miss the days of Jackson. I know I'm sounding old and I'm dating myself, but I mean, you remember when you would walk into KB and a whole aisle of just wrestling figures. Here's the Jakks Classics. Here's Off the Ropes. Here's Ruthless Aggression. Here's Deluxe Aggression. Here's 3-packs, 2-pack. It was just all over the place, and it was fantastic. Now you walk in and you got a couple basics, and you're like, oh, well, that was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, no, that's really the thing, and I was just about to bring up KB Toys because I used to love, KBs. And I remember a point where there were 2 KBs in the same mall, and you know that they were both getting figures in, but you would have to, it was almost like a game, which store, depending on which end of the mall, would get them in first. And, but the thing was, I even remember a time, like I said, when there were 4 or 5 Toys R Us's, and it wasn't a matter of question of if you were going to find something, it was just a win. You were going to find something. And, it's so crazy to me is that, you see some stores will be flooded with current figures or stuck on other ones, and it just the luck. It's it's almost the luck of the draw, but it's like you don't even know the rules to the game. There's no restocking schedule. There's no limit per what you can buy. It's really just the wild west of collecting out there. And I've definitely seen an increase in the wrestling figures in particular, but I personally think that's believed. I used to have two Targets in my same town, and they were kind of on the opposite edges of the town, and I really think one of them shut. And I think because one of them shut, rather than adjusting their numbers to really reflecting, okay, there was a Target here that just shut down, they just kept the other Target at its same kind of stock numbers. So now they're getting the stock that is only for one Target, which really should be for like two Targets. I don't know. That's just my conspiracy theory.
So let's go back to wrestlers that you have met. You have met quite a few. Who else aside from the Hardys have you met?
So I have met a few. In terms of like notable wrestlers, I met Hogan, Hall, and Nash on their NWO gear down at Hogan's Beach Shop. That was 2 Octobers ago. That was too sweet, pun intended. But I met John Cena. I met CM Punk. I met Roman Reigns. I met Becky Lynch. I met Finn Balor. I've really, had the opportunity to meet so many superstars, and I highly recommend it. I've met Cody Rhodes. I met Jericho. I actually was able to meet Jericho at a Fozzy concert too, which was a really incredible experience. But the thing is for me when meeting superstars is it lets you it's like, you have your mark out moment, but then you're like, oh wait, they're just like me. In particular for when I met Roman Reigns, meeting Roman Reigns was, an incredible moment. Definitely one of the top superstars I've met. And along with CM Punk, I remember I was very anxious to meet CM Punk because I've heard that he didn't like signing WWE things. And I was having him sign my belt. And, I was like, what if he doesn't want to talk and whatever. But he was just an incredible, person. He validated everything that I thought meeting CM Punk would be like. And so that's really, my message always, and I always preach it, is when you have an opportunity to meet your favorite superstars, meet them.
Did you get to ask Punk anything, or was it just a quick sign and go?
So for CM Punk, it was a quick signing for the professional picture. I also paid for the selfie option. So I got a little bit more time with him. We were talking about tattoo stuff. I asked him how he enjoyed writing for the Drax comic book, as well as he wrote for Thor. So, he was happy about those questions, I think, to be non-wrestling. But one thing that, he really appreciated was, I asked him, I said, do you mind signing my belt? And he said, well, do you want me to make it out to anybody? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, I want you to make it out to Jeff. You're my favorite superstar. This isn't being sold. This isn't going anywhere. And he really appreciated that sentiment. And he took the time to, make it out to me, and just really made it a really special moment that he didn't have to.
Oh, that's cool, man. So why don't you talk about the Roman Reigns signing? You said that was one of your top favorite signings of all time.
Yeah, it really was. Roman Reigns, to me, as controversial as he is, he's continually one of my favorite superstars, particularly because of how he deals with pressure and adversity and really being in the spotlight. I was at the Raw in Atlanta when he made his remission promo. So when I was able to meet Roman Reigns, it was when he was in recovery. He wasn't supposed to really be interacting with anybody, and we shared some personal stories. I showed him, a couple things, and just, kind of really had like a heart-to-heart moment. And he just gave me a bro hug, and I was just like, "But you're not even supposed to be like interacting with people, and never mind, this many people and interacting." And it just really cemented, everything that I thought, similar to Punk, of Roman Reigns. was just, he is this, this larger than life person, which was really great to see.
That's awesome. So why don't you go into your Kross Rhodes podcast that you do?
Yeah. So the Kross Rhodes is a podcast with me and my good friend, Dusty Dave. And the Kross Rhodes is it's a wrestling show that he's a big Killer Kross fan. I'm a big Cody Rhodes fan. And it is a topical wrestling show where he picks his favorite wrestling topic of the week. I pick my favorite wrestling topic of the week, and we break it down. We comment on it. It's very similar to Not Your Mama's Soap Opera in the lens that I bring to it, but it's a completely new project. It's really just positive wrestling for everybody, and just a little positivity. When everything that's going on today, we just wanted to create a space that was a safe escape for everyone.
I really enjoyed your Not Your Mama's Soap Opera podcast because I love the way you delved into people's characters. I think the first one was CM Punk, and you kind of went over what made people gravitate to him. What was it that hooked us? And I loved how you delved into people's characters. I thought that was fantastic. It was something unique because, anyone can do just a wrestling podcast. But when you come up with something unique such as that, I thought that was fantastic. And I told you a few times, I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, Not Your Mama's Soap Opera was definitely a passion project of mine. And I'm working on ways to release my back catalog for people to give it a listen. But it was a really cool way for me to, showcase the entertainment side of professional wrestling. We mentioned it before, you always kind of get those people who are like, you still watch wrestling? And
Yes.
For me, my constant, argument was like, do you watch Game of Thrones? Do you watch Dexter? Do you watch this? Do you watch that? Do you watch any of these shows? And even reality shows, they're all scripted. They all have producers. They're all different forms of entertainment. It's just, this is my form of entertainment. And I wanted to elevate wrestling to a sense that when you talk about wrestling, don't talk about it like you're watching, a fake or scripted, predetermined fight. Talk about it like you're watching any other TV show, any other movie, anything that you would view as entertainment.
Mm-hmm. That you're 100% correct. And that it has that stigma. Oh, it's quote unquote fake fighting. Well, you also have to look at it that these people only have one chance to do this acrobatic move. Ricochet only has one chance to do such move, whatever it may be. Will Ospreay, same thing. One time to do this one move. It's just so unique that these guys not only are playing characters, but they're going out and, I hate to say this, but they're going out and doing their stunts, and they only have one take to do it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, and that's why I really appreciated the Boneyard match from this past WrestleMania, because you were able to see the full cinematic power behind the WWE, and to give you a performance that you didn't know Undertaker was in any pain. You didn't know anything of those little things that you might have seen in a normal ring or even otherwise, because they were able to really just turn it all the way up and give you that full cinematic experience. And that's the art of it, though. That's the believability. For me, it's always, if you are watching a fight and you react to anything at all, they're doing their job, because they're getting you to suspend your disbelief and focus on the match for that very moment.
Mm-hmm. You're 100% correct. And they're making you believe. They're making you... They can make you take your mind off of, oh, this is fake. Even for a little bit, they did their job. If you get sucked into a match, they did their job. Even if you're like, oh, this is fake, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that was cool. Well, they did their job to make a non-believer a believer for that split second.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. And, there are countless, moments that, you're watching wrestling and, you're taken back by the moment that, you're witnessing. I was able to attend the first AEW Dynamite taping in Washington, D.C., and it was just so cool to be a part of that history and just really see, something, that momentous take place.
Mm-hmm.
And wrestling, I think, at the end of the day, is a community. And that's why, for me especially, I can't wait to get to a day when we can have fans safely again. And fans play such, a large role in a wrestling show, and just being able to interact and have a live crowd react to what's going on in the ring and then react back. It's a communication and a conversation that's taking place for the viewers at home.
And I think people are realizing how important fans are now. I mean, I don't ever want to hear anybody complain about a stupid chant or anything ever again. We miss the fans. That's what it is. And we miss being at the shows, period. That's what it is we miss that live entertainment.
Yeah, that's really what it is. And wrestling is, my escape. Growing up, collecting action figures was always my escape. So wrestling action figures, it's almost like a Hannah Montana best of both worlds type thing, because I was able to have, the escape from figures and wrestling all, really all in one.
Yep. Jeff, I want to thank you for being on. Why don't you plug your Kross Rhodes podcast?
Thank you, Jeff. You can follow the Kross Rhodes at TheKrossRhodes, spelt like Karrion Kross and the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. If you want to follow me, you could do so on Twitter at Long Island 1892.
I'm still jealous that Scott got to meet you down in Los Angeles. I had just gotten back to the hotel when you landed.
Yeah.
I want to say it was like, what, 12:15 at night, 12:30? Actually, in the morning?
I think so. Yeah. Fun fact about that show was I was supposed to fly to meet Hogan when I met him. And long story short, TSA basically they screwed up, and because they screwed up, I missed my flight. Spirit gave me a voucher that I had to use for like non-holiday weekends and had to be domestic. And I said, well, Survivor Series is in Los Angeles. Let's go. And it was literally just this last minute 36-hour, dash to California. But it was an incredible time. And it was, right, during the midst of the Becky hype and Ronda Rousey's for one of her first bouts with Charlotte. And it was just a really cool time. And, seeing Scott was definitely a highlight of it. And I just remember leading up to that, I was like, all right, I'm seeing one of you at some point when I'm in California.
That's funny, man. Because I had gotten back to the room and you had texted me or messaged me and you're like, hey, you want to go out? And I'm like, oh my God, we just got back in and we're just like crashing right now because it had been a long day. We had been up since 6:15 after a 5-hour. We slept for 5 hours because we drove down the night before, got to the Undertaker signing at like 7 a.m., had to rush over to the Staples Center for NXT. Then we went over to Chico's Tacos for a little mini meetup, but it was a little mini one. But anyways, by the time we got back to the hotel, it was like 12:15 and 12:30. You're like, hey, you want to meet up? And I'm like, man, I got to go to bed. I am beat. We got to leave and go home tomorrow.
Yeah, and that that was the crazy thing, WrestleMania being in New York, or New Jersey technically last year, our schedules was so crazy. So I was like, all right, we're both going to Tampa. It's finally gonna happen. The Jeffs are gonna interact, and it's gonna be great. And then I was like, all right, that's just what I needed. It was the pandemic to hit, but I'm just very excited, like we said, to get back to that, whether it's that next Mania, that, that really big hard feel, and really, make more memories like big meetups and just meetups in general, and just being a part of that larger, wrestling community and Big Life family.
100%. Jeff, thank you again for being on, man. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. No, it was really my pleasure. The wrestling figure, the Fully Poseable Wrestling Figure podcast was one of the first podcasts that I actually listened to. Fun fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was looking. I remember this. I literally Googled on Apple. I said wrestling figures because I was like, there has to be a show, and it was around like episode 19 or something like that. And I quickly went back and listened. I was like, there's no way that this show exists. And it was just such a cool thing to really play a part in the community that you and Scott built. I'm even wearing my Hasbro Series 2 shirt, the cardback shirt, all drew by Jason Wolf that I had the pleasure of being a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, I mean, it's just been, a wonderful experience, being a part of the Fig Life family, and always, having that, people to talk figures with. It's one of those, greatest experiences I have as a collector. So thank you and Scott tremendously for everything that you've contributed and built.
Well, the Fig Life family loves having you a part of it, man. We really, really do. Jeff, thank you again, and we'll be talking.
Absolutely. You be good.
All right, you too, man.
Later, brother.
Bye. Want to thank Jeff Palmacio for being on. Again, check out his Kross Rhodes podcast. Very unique. I love it. He also had Not Your Mama Soap Opera, which was a fun podcast. Now, I think we need to get our next Fig Lifer on.
Hello.
Is this famed author Erin Quinn?
This is her. Thank you so much.
No problem. How are you doing?
I'm good, Jeff. How's it going?
It's going well. I've been loving our discussion about 93 WCW lately.
That's what this call is about, right?
Yeah. Was there anything else that we were going to talk about?
No. So I actually just discovered my Holy Grail match.
Which is?
It is what is on record as the last United States Tag Team title match ever, which was Dirty Dick Slater and the Barbarian, classic tag team, versus Brian Pillman and Tom Zink.
Oh, wait, didn't Pillman and Zink hold those U.S. titles?
They did, but back in 90.
Yes.
But apparently they tagged one last time.
Ah, okay.
One last run at that gold.
Before it became Tom Zink and Johnny Gunn.
A classic. Oh, so good.
So how's everything going over there?
It's going really good. I don't know what outside is anymore.
Right? I've been in that same boat over here. So tell us a little bit about your Tailless book.
Oh, sure. Yes, thanks. I'll be happy to plug anything.
Please do.
So my life is an amalgamation of geek fandoms.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's wrestling. We know that. But I'm also in the furry community.
Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tailless is a story with that kind of motif.
Oh, okay.
A political drama featuring animal characters.
And when did you write it?
Tailless took 10 years. So I started it sometime in my early 20s.
Oh, okay.
And I finished it when I was much older. I wrote about half of it, and then I lost a draft of it and had to start from scratch at one point, and it was published. It will be, I think it is 4 years ago as of this year.
Oh, that's so awesome to hear. When you put your mind to something like that, even after you lose the opening draft and you still complete it, that's got to be like a huge sigh of relief.
It was an intense labor of love, but more on the labor side, to be honest. And I have not wanted to tackle a project that big since then. But it was really cool. It was really cool, and I'm happy with people who bought it and enjoyed it. And it is still available for sale.
Mm-hmm.
If you Google Tailless and Erin Quinn with 2 N's, it's pretty easy to find. The Amazon link and my publisher's link are the first 2 things that pop up. So if you like animal people and you like drama and melodrama, go ahead and throw a few bucks that way.
Do it. Everybody needs to go.
Thanks for the ad read.
No problem. I've got you. Don't worry about it. I've got to go back. When did your love of wrestling start? What was the first thing that you gravitated to?
I think it was the winter or the fall of 1989.
Okay.
I was 7 years old. And the first thing I remember was flipping the channels, and I distinctly recall Brutus Beefcake throwing a clothesline. And I was like, what did that man just do? He just knocked that other man down. What a form of defense. What is this? And I was instantly hooked. I'm like, what? Fighting on TV is cool. And it was a very slippery slope from there. Yeah, I remember watching like the go home show essentially for WrestleMania 6.
Mm-hmm.
I remember really thinking Power and Glory was cool. Very smarky at a young age. So that's where it started, and so simple. And to think if it was anything else Beefcake was doing at the time, I may not have ever been hooked.
Would the sleeper hold have captivated you?
The great what if questions of our generation. I mean, maybe.
Now, did you immediately find WCW after that, or were you just strictly WWF? You knew that at this time, on this channel, on Saturdays, wrestling was going to be on, or did you happen to know that there was other wrestling on too?
No, I remember, like, I think I just got into this mode of, like, checking, like, all the time. Because, you know, you have the whole weekend, and I feel like I wasn't one of those kids. I never, like, slept in a lot. I'd be up, and my parents on Friday night would be their go out to the bar drinking night.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would drop me and my sister off at my grandma's. And I was much older than my sister, so I would just get the TV, and I just flip channels. And I grew up in Iowa,
mm-hmm.
which is it's not a heavy one promotion or another. I mean, in the 80s, you could have made a case even for AWA
mm-hmm.
as like our local promotion. So we had TBS, we had USA. I remember WCW Power Hour came on Friday nights, like really late at night, and then it would replay again at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. And that's probably the first WCW program I saw. And the first big show that I remember was the Clash of Champions 10, which I think was January or February of 1990, and that's the show where Sting tore his ACL.
Who did he face that night?
He didn't fight anyone. He had won the Iron Man tournament at Starrcade 90,
mm-hmm.
89, and I guess that had guaranteed him a title shot because he had beat Ric Flair in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
But Sting was already in the Horsemen at this time, and that was the night that Ole Anderson gave him the "we don't challenge Ric Flair around here."
That's
talk.
Right. That's right.
And they turned on Sting.
Yep.
And that was the first big WCW angle that I ever saw. And then that night he tried to get into the cage, and that's where he blew out his knee.
That's right.
From there, I was like a Sting fan for life. I'm like, he's going to come back, and he's going to get his revenge on the Horseman, and he's got RoboCop.
It's funny, too, because you think back to that first major angle where the wrestler turned on another wrestler. For us, it was Orndorff turning on Hogan. So that was big to us. It was like, why did Orndorff just turn on his friend? You know, we don't understand this. So I can imagine what you were thinking when the Horseman turned on Sting.
I didn't even really have that much of a reference. Like, I was like, okay, this Horseman group, they seem like shady characters.
Oh, they are.
Oh, they turned on Sting. Because I hadn't really watched in 89 or anything before that. So if you dive into WCW or NWA right in January of that year, like the Horsemen are baby faces,
mm-hmm.
and they're fighting like Gary Hart's crew, which
yep.
has some guy named the Dragon Master in it. You don't have a frame of reference to really understand like Sting shouldn't be aligned with these dudes,
mm-hmm.
but they still suck you in because Flair and Ole especially are such great talkers that you get it right away. You don't really even need the context.
So what was your very first show? Was it a house show? Was it a taping or anything?
Yes, I was thinking about this when I was finishing up work tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad got me tickets to a house show in February of, I believe, 1990.
Okay.
So I was there right away, and I am trying to find those results because it is it's an awful show. It is. we did not get the big shows.
Okay, so you got the B shows.
I would love a B show. Are you kidding me? Wait till I find this lineup here. This is not a B show. This is, let's see here. So that would have been, so they came to the Wharton Field House, which was in Moline, Illinois, right across the Mississippi River from Davenport.
Okay.
Which is where I lived.
Okay.
And this was our card. January 12th, 1990, so it was just like the week after my birthday. New wrestling fan, never been to a show. And I will say that, I was only 8 years old. And when we went there, I lasted through a few matches, but just the cheering and the lights and the sound, it was like sensory overload. So we left early.
Mm-hmm.
But in retrospect, I didn't miss anything. So this show started out with Earthquake defeating Paul Roma.
Okay.
And in our second bout, now that the crowd's warmed up, it is Tugboat defeating Frenchie Martin.
Oh, God.
After that back and forth collision, we had another colossal jostle of Hercules defeating Tom Stone.
Oh, my God. The job guy, Tom Stone?
The Tom Stone.
Okay, you did get the C crew.
Now, originally for this show, apparently there was a Dusty Rhodes Big Boss Man match that was scheduled. That's exciting.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Instead, we got Sapphire defeating Slick.
Oh.
Because the Boss Man had an injury that prevented him from competing that night.
Okay.
So some intergender action. Definitely very just setting like a huge precedent for the business, like pioneering. That was followed up by the Bushwhackers defeating the Bolsheviks.
Okay.
And then we got into the meat of the card. Rick Martel defeated Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And in your main event, the Ultimate Warrior defeated Dino Bravo.
Well, at least you got Warrior there. I mean, Warrior could technically push it up to a B card, but that undercard.
Yeah, I don't know. They had 2 other shows that night.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They ran Indiana, and that was the Hogan crew, so that was definitely a lot better. And there was another show in Kansas. The only match listed here is like Ted DiBiase versus Jake Roberts. So I don't know, but if anyone has footage of Hercules versus Tom Stone, definitely looking to track it down.
So were you hooked on wrestling figures right away too?
Yeah, 100%. Because I was already like super into figures. So it was the 80s, and I was doing like the He-Man and the G.I. Joe.
Okay.
So, like the ones that most kids had.
So are you loving Scott talking about G.I. Joes?
I mean, I'm not as much a G.I. Joe gal as other people.
Mm-hmm.
I would not go buy those new figures. I definitely like respect. So it's fun to hear about. It's fun to hear about, like, we're just of this age where we're getting all these like collector variations of things we had as kids.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of another time when that's happened. But I love the G.I. Joes. Those were cool. But once I got into wrestling, the G.I. Joes became a figure fed. I was into He-Man, and once I liked wrestling, the He-Men became a figure fed. And then eventually, I think I was in a store one day and I saw, and honestly, I think it was a Brutus Beefcake. I think I saw a Brutus Beefcake Hasbro,
mm-hmm.
and maybe the Rick Rude Hasbro.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the first 2 I got. And I know that was sometime in 1990 when they came out. And from there, it's just off to the races forever.
Did you go crazy when you got the Stingaloop?
Yeah. No, the Stingaloop is like an amazing figure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just captures it so well. And I'm pretty sure I got it that year. I don't recall when those Galoops came out, like 90 or 91.
It was around there, yeah.
But Sting was definitely always at the top of my figure fed. When you could, I do like summer daycare, and the Sting would come with me, and you'd either take like an Arn Anderson or the Ric Flair and give him a heel to beat.
Mm-hmm.
Over and over and over again. So yeah, no, that was a beautiful figure, an amazing likeness in such a small form.
Now, did you ever integrate wrestling figures with G.I. Joes or He-Man or anything like that?
No, I get really picky about the size differential.
Mm-hmm.
So the He-Men were like the one size, and they could all wrestle each other, and the G.I. Joes were one size, and they had so much articulation in the way those like rubber band joints were,
mm-hmm.
that you could do any move with them. And so that was a whole different like type of fun. But like anyone, I mixed the Galoobs and the Hasbros together because they were like quietly made to be compatible with each other.
They were pretty close and very similar. I mean, obviously one moved, the other didn't. But as far as height-wise, they could integrate. So that was... A lot of people I hear were doing that with their Galoobs, and a lot of people also were making Sting their champion because everybody loved Sting. And if you go back and you watch those early WCW days, like I'm doing right now, you can hear the crowd just go insane for Sting. And not because it was a smaller crowd, but the popularity that he had, it was deafening. They talk about the Road Warrior pop. Sting had that in the early 90s.
Yeah, no, he had this, for me, he had this charisma, but he was never a jerk. And I was one of those kids like around 92 with the 92 Rumble. I'm like, this Hogan guy, he's not really acting on the level. You lost fair and square, buddy. But Sting would never do that. He was always on the side of good. He'd help out a friend. The only people who turned on him typically were the people who were already bad. Sting's actions didn't make people hate him unlike Orndorff and Hogan.
Yes. It's funny going back and watching this WCW. I forgot how long Orndorff was actually in WCW at that time. It's just one of those things you put in the back of your mind and just want to forget. Just keep burying it.
He had such a long run there, and he's there till he retires, and then he wrestles in like 2000 even for like one match.
When you were collecting the Hasbros, did you go and get every single figure, or were you only allowed to pick and choose certain ones?
I think I was it was one of those situations where I could get what was available. I don't recall having like a certain amount that I was allowed to spend or anything like that. We didn't get every set. I know towards the very, very tail end, like I never saw a green card in the stores in my life. And I only saw like half the yellow cards and some of the purple cards. Up until like those later series, I was able to get everything that was available. My parents were super cool about it. They didn't like splurge like every figure all at once, but by the time the Hasbros were really deep, I was kind of like only doing wrestling figures. So I think that makes it a little easy on parents if they're not like, I want the He-Man, I want the G.I. Joe, I want Mask.
Did you also pick up the old San Francisco toy makers?
No, those are terrible.
Not the vibrating ones.
No, I was thinking of the vibrating ones because those were the first ones that I saw. I think I owned one. I owned one of the vibrators.
You never saw the LJN-esque figures?
I remember seeing them, but not a lot of them.
Oh.
And they didn't catch my eye at all. I don't know how I ended up with one of the vibrators. I think it was the Kevin Sullivan. I think one of my friends had like a giant and a Voldemort. And we just kind of looked at him and we're like, hey, press the button. What? Okay.
It was so confusing at the time. It was like, there's a reason they're in our Hall of Shame. I mean, it was pretty bad, but it was kind of like, what are we supposed to do with these things? They vibrate. Don't get it. I mean, and a lot of people could actually say that about the LJNs too. They don't move. But at the same time, at least they had some, I guess you could say, playability to it.
Well, yeah, the Galoobs didn't move, but you can use your imagination.
Correct.
So I would propose that the vibrators came too late. If you recall, WCW had the Chamber of Horrors match in 1991. The finish of that, of course, is Abdullah the Butcher getting electrocuted. And what does someone do when they're electrocuted? Obviously, they vibrate. Clearly, these were meant to simulate electrocution. An odd gimmick match to center a line around, but who am I to judge? I also always thought of it as when you're playing Fire Pro and you critical someone.
Oh, good point.
You can hit the vibrator button and they're dead.
Good
so they're
point.
Going into rigor mortis right there.
That's an excellent point.
set redeemed out of the Hall of Shame.
I don't think we'll go that far, but okay, good point. I'll give you that much. When did you first discover independent wrestling? Because I know you love independent wrestling.
I love independent wrestling. Independent wrestling's great.
Isn't it so much fun?
It's so much fun. We had none in Iowa growing up in the mid-90s. I don't remember seeing anything. I don't remember hearing about anything. I guess if you want to call it independent wrestling, the first exposure would be ECW. Like that whole, and I discovered ECW maybe like late 95 or 96 in the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought a couple of TV VHSs of the TV show, and I was just blown away. The production was gritty. It was using real music, and I had never seen wrestling when they used real music because I started in WWF in '89, and WCW kind of cut that out when they were acquired.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, oh wow, okay, and there's like no rules, and they're breaking tables, and I'd never seen that before. And who is this Sabu guy? Like, I was just captivated by like 95 and 96 Sabu is like just one of the most unique performers we've ever had.
He was revolutionary.
Back before he broke down, there was this fluidity, and he was doing all this dangerous stuff, and it seemed so out of control. But he had almost this control. Michael Cole would also always say controlled chaos about controlled frenzy about Kofi Kingston, and with Kofi it makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
But that was kind of Sabu. Like, you kind of knew this guy has like in his head, he's got like the next 5 things he's gonna do, and 3 of them might actually hit, but he's just gonna go through it, and it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing ECW was just like revolutionary.
Did you get the very first pay-per-view?
I did not. I was doing all the WCW pay-per-views at the time because I was like zeroed in on the NWO storyline.
Okay.
And I wasn't, because I was still following ECW like through the magazines and online. So there wasn't that like, I didn't see the run up to want to buy the pay-per-view. But I know the next day I called, and I don't know why I did this. I called the guy who eventually would run High Spots, and this was 97 when I don't know if I had found him in a magazine or through message boards, but I was buying ECW from him by then.
Oh.
And I had called him up the next day, and bless his heart, he told me what happened at the pay-per-view. We were on the phone for like a half hour. Like, I wanted to know the results. And, and I'd say, okay, well, I'll buy this, that, and the other thing. Send me the VHSs. And I'm like 15 or 16. So, yeah, let's just call weird people on the phone, talk about wrestling, buy VHSs in the mail, kid stuff.
Oh man, the stuff we used to do. I remember Scott and I would call the WWF hotline because Jim Ross would always be like, I can't tell you what happened here, but you got to call the hotline because Ultimate Warrior may have shown up on something. We're like, we need to know what happened with Warrior. And so Scott and I would be on the phone for like 5-10 minutes racking up our parents' phone bill. And finally our parents got the phone bill and they're like, hey, we need to talk about this WWF hotline number. We're like, what about it? And they're like, it's getting pricey. You spent about $250. We're like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, you guys need to stop. We're like, all right. We used to.
Oh my God. My grandma would let me call the hotline like once a month. So I don't know what day I would call it on. Just, it'd be like a Friday or Saturday. And so I remember trying to play like the little game where it gave you choose your own adventure options. Like, can you beat Hulk Hogan? I'm like, yeah, sure. I know what to do. I watch wrestling. This game isn't rigged to get me to spend my money.
Oh, 1990s. That was a lot of fun. So you were hooked on ECW and WCW. Did you go in and purchase the Toy Biz figures?
I love the Toy Biz figures. I know there is some contention between you and Scott about them. And I forget which one of you likes them and which one has the wrong opinion.
Oh, well, since I never have the wrong opinion, it's Scott is the one that loves them. He absolutely loved it. And it's funny, too, because I do another show on the Lucha Central network called Lucha Figures and Facts. The gentleman on there, the host of it, his name is Eric Arana. He worked at Hasbro, and he now does the boss fight figures with Penta and Phoenix. and he loved the Toy Biz figures. In fact, our second episode, I'm not sure what the official date is that's going to drop. We talk about the Conan figure, and he loved those figures, and he just loved them because of the articulation on them and how many points of articulation and everything. He just adored that line. But do you remember your first figure that you got from the WCW Toy Biz line?
Yeah, I think it was the white version of Scott Hall, which is a great figure. Maybe a little skinny in the legs, but he has the action to do the fall away slam.
Yep.
And he has the vest. He's got the little curl in front of his head. I thought it was a cool series, and I appreciate any line where this is your only chance to get this figure. Like, the Toy Biz line is the only time you get a Canyon figure.
Good. That's a good point.
There is actually a customizer on Instagram who is currently doing some customs of Toy Biz figures.
Oh.
And he just did a Glacier.
Whoa, who is this?
Which, I'm going to find this right now because it looks amazing. It's just unbelievable, and he's sculpting a mortise.
Is it
right?
Warsman or I know there's a gentleman, he does custom heads, and he did a mortise one that I thought was fantastic. Jason Wolf is actually doing something similar as well, and he's killing it as well. The talent on these guys, I swear.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like,
there needs to be a YouTube tutorial.
I tried 2 customs. I had and this was before there was a Jericho, but there was a G.I. Joe figure. It wasn't one of the 4.5-inch G.I. Joe figures. This was one of those G.I. Joe Extreme, or one of those 90s edgy 90s series. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, in the face, this looks like Jericho. So all I need to do is get my Swiss Army knife, cut off the utility pouches on his pants, and paint it, and it will look like Chris Jericho. Sure, good plan. So I just sat there at my desk with my knife, no other planning or thinking things through, and I just started to whittle at this, and eventually the knife just slid, and I sliced off a part of one of my middle fingers.
Ooh.
And I'm like, Mom, I'm bleeding real bad. and it healed, but if you shine a light on it just right, you can see where I got the cut. So that went really bad.
Did you need stitches?
No, luckily not.
Okay, good.
But I still finished the custom. I just painted it, and I wrote Lionheart on the back of the vest it came with in very terrible penmanship. And from there, it was it was real good. Oh, okay. So the Instagram account is wrestling_figure_workshop.
Okay, I think I follow him. I'm gonna go double check. But
yeah, he's doing a mortise, and it looks like it's gonna be amazing. And the Glacier was just a work of art. So
it's funny you mentioned custom. Scott tried a custom. Scott tried a Hogan Old San Francisco Toy Makers LJN style figure, and he painted it black and white for the NWO, and it came out horrible. And Scott's like, I'm never doing this again.
Sometimes just slapping paint on top of paint and does not work.
It does not work. Did you also collect the ECW figures?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm honestly shocked that we got them in Iowa, just because I never felt like we were never the territory for ECW. But yeah, and I really like them. Some days I'm like, these are great figures, and other days I'm like, half these figures look terrible. There's some ones, if I could wave a magic wand and make them better, like that Jerry Lynn. Like, I don't understand the legs are very small. I don't understand the action. I don't believe if you ever make a figure of a high flyer of any kind, you don't put the legs right together. And that Shane Douglas is really weird. He's on a lot of steroids in that figure. But some of them are really good. It's a great, super crazy. I love the RVDs. The Sabus are really good. I think it's a really cool line. I wish it went longer.
Same. There were some weird repaints, like Tommy Dreamer. Everybody points back to that Dreamer. It's just
in the yellow shirt.
In the yellow shirt. Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, with the yellow shirt.
Right. No, they should be apologizing.
Touche. Well done.
Don't you remember all the nights that Tommy came to the ring in his classic yellow shirt?
Every night. every ECW show.
What a Hulkamaniac he was. And there's like a couple I don't have still, like the repaints, but that is not. Don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking at these right now. So can you picture the Balls Mahoney?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the Balls Mahoney, and maybe I'm the only one, but his one leg, his right leg is almost like there's the pants, but then the leg is like silver all the way down to the boot. And I realized maybe they're trying to like simulate a knee pad or something, but I always just thought, yeah, Balls Mahoney and his robotic leg. Yeah, here he comes to the ring. He's a cyborg now.
He's RoboCop.
He is RoboCop. He was RoboCop all along. I think the Taz figure is like still one of the better Taz figures.
Nothing against Jax. You know, Scott and I love Jax over here, but that ECW Taz figure blows the Jax ones out of the water. I always loved that ECW Taz figure.
It's like it's got the poseability to do all of his suplexes, and he doesn't come with a towel around his waist for out of the shower Taz action. Like the Jax one,
right?
But there's some I don't have. Raven, the Mike Awesome, like the harder to find one, the later series I never saw, and I still am curious where that prototype Roadkill went.
Good question. Maybe just ended up in a box somewhere. Unfortunately, who knows? It'll resurface someday.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone step up and say, "Yeah, that's in my collection." Everyone.
Usually, people will step up and say, "Hey, I've got this prototype or whatnot." That one has never seemed to resurface. Jax did come out with a best of WCW and ECW line that I was in love with. I don't know about you, but I was in love with that line.
I did not get any of those because I would go like hot and cold with Jax because there's just so many of them.
Mm-hmm. Especially the BCAs.
Yes. I have a lot of BCAs. I got a lot of BCAs, maybe more than people should admit. Some of these probably should go back and get. No, this isn't good. Don't talk with other collectors while on eBay. No, I might have the Spike. I think I might have got the Spike Dudley if Spike Dudley was in that set, maybe. Sadly, I typed in Jack's best of ECW, and I get a lot of like WWECW.
Gotcha. So the best of was okay. It was ECW was Bubba and Devon, Stevie within the BWO shirt, and I'm missing one or two. And then the WCW line, they made Flair, they made Rey Mysterio from his Halloween Havoc 97, and I'm missing another one.
There's an Eddie. I just found a lot.
Oh yes, thank you. He was in the white, right?
Yeah, the white and red.
Yep.
Kind of like the babyface attire.
Yep. I love that line, and it was funny. Scott actually got that for me for my birthday, and I popped huge when I opened up that box. He was like, "I don't know if you want these." I was like, "Yeah, I do." Like I'm yelling at him, but like in excitement. And he's like, "Oh, okay, cool, thanks, man."
Yeah, definitely.
Such great.
No, these are real nice. That's very cool.
So you talk about your love of independent wrestling. How many wrestlers have you met because of independent wrestling?
Oh, okay. So the first time I went and met a bunch of wrestlers, I went to my mom, for some reason, drove me to Chicago the day before Heat Wave 99.
Oh.
Because CW was doing a fan fest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wasn't going to get to go to the show because that was on a Sunday, and Monday was a school night, so that was not a thing that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I did get to go to the ECW thing, so I got to meet Bill Alfonso, Joey Styles, Jerry Lynn, Danny Doring and Roadkill, Just Incredible, Nova, Balls, Spike Dudley. Ran into Bill Apter for a moment. Axel Rotten, Cyrus, and that was really cool. And I have in my closet, I have the one Jerry Lynn t-shirt that ECW released, signed by Jerry Lynn. And I just had everyone sign it while I was wearing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got 8 or 9 signatures. Some of them are fading, obviously, but that's one of the favorite things that I own. Like, it's so cool. And from there, like, I met DDP once. I guess he's not an independent wrestler, but he's an independent businessman, so we'll count that. We have a pretty good scene here in Austin. Mm-hmm. At one time, we had 3 companies running, and so got to meet a lot of the big names on the indies, just for like even like a 8x10 and a handshake.
Right, because you guys had Wrestle Circus out there.
We did have Wrestle Circus. Wrestle Circus was here, and it was a bright, shining light, and gone before its time.
So, for those that don't know, Wrestle Circus was an independent promotion, and most of everyone has heard of Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Picture Pro Wrestling Guerrilla in the Austin scene. I would see clips all the time for Wrestle Circus, and I was jealous of everybody in Austin being able to go to Wrestle Circus because a lot of people ran through there. Cage was there. Brian Cage was always there. Orange Cassidy was there a few times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Orange Cassidy was here. Lance Archer was here.
Mm-hmm.
Scorpio Sky was one of the mainstays down here.
Mm-hmm.
We got the Rascals
a
number of times. Sammy Guevara, it was really like, say what you will about Wrestle Circus and now they're gone or whatever, but it was really like they gave Sammy like such an opportunity to have bigger and bigger matches.
Mm-hmm.
That I really think that's what gave him a spotlight. So they brought in like Ricochet to work with them, and one month they brought in Colt Cabana to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
We got Shane Strickland.
Mm-hmm.
Just so many people came through here.
Yeah.
So it was cool. The shows were just ridiculously fun. I wish it was still around. One of the best live matches I ever saw. And you may be able to find it. I don't know what of their stuff has been put out for free or not yet. But if anyone listening to this can find it, they did a show January of 2017 or 2018, I think. And it was Phoenix versus Shane Strickland versus Desmond Xavier.
Oh, boy.
And it was one of the top 5 matches I've ever seen live. And I've heard that from multiple people who were there. They just did some ridiculous next level stuff.
Phoenix is one of those wrestlers that you make sure you get your money's worth when you go and see him. I've seen him numerous times at AEW, All In, All Out. And every single time you see him wrestle, you're like, well, I just got my money's worth. Whatever I paid, I just got it, because Phoenix would always put on a show.
The talent and poise and balance that he has, like, I'm amazed watching every time, but I'm like, I don't think if my brain is actively processing how amazing this is yet. Still, I just need to watch more and more and more. Like, I hope he can have more chances to do single stuff in AEW once things are done, but we'll see. I know him and Penta are pretty joined at the hip, but
So are you gonna get the whole first series of the AEW figures?
I'm going to. I don't have them pre-ordered yet.
Okay.
I would like to be able to find the first set out in the wild. I think that would be a lot of fun. I did order the Jericho Bubbly figure.
Nice.
Because it's an exclusive. I want to have it.
So I have to ask, what is your favorite figure of all time?
I'm looking back at my display case real quick.
Do you have like a huge display case downstairs?
Well, I mean, wow, I thank you for assuming I have a downstairs. I mean, I do have a downstairs. This is an 800 square foot apartment. It only has a downstairs because it's a loft bedroom, but thank you still.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Cats love it. But I do have one display case, one of those DTOS from the IKEA. It was the last thing I did in Civilization before the virus was putting it together. That Defining Moments Flair, the one that's the Rumble 92.
With the black robe?
Yes, the black and white robe.
Yes, that one is really good.
Because I remember I had friends over for a Rumble party.
Mm-hmm.
We got an ice cream cake that had a ring designed in the icing.
Ooh.
And I was the only one of my friends who was wanting Ric Flair to win.
And you got your wish.
Yeah, it was a great Rumble. That is just... What a story.
It is fantastic because everything about that Rumble just popped. I mean, Piper and Flair going at it, Bobby Heenan sweating in the booth, and I just loved it. Hogan turning, well, he didn't turn heel, but I pulled a heel move because he got thrown out by Sid, and he acted like a baby and pulled Sid out. So it had everything. It just one of those Rumbles that I absolutely loved. I love the 94 Rumble from top to bottom. I absolutely love that 94 Rumble. That's one of my favorites, the 2007 Rumble where it was Michaels and Taker at the end. But that 92 Rumble just has that special feel to it and that nostalgia specialness to it.
It is this encapsulated hour-long story of almost everyone in that Rumble has some sort of history with Ric Flair.
Yes,
like,
good point.
Greg Valentine comes down, and it's like, oh, they were tag team partners a billion years ago. Kerry Von Erich, and it's like, whoa, world-class NWA title all over again.
Yep.
It's the roster is like so filled of the ghosts of Ric Flair's past that it's so fun.
Absolutely love it. Well, Erin, I must go, but it was a absolute pleasure talking to you.
You as well. I feel like it's a very long time coming. The podcast has been a staple in my week for many years, so I appreciate what you and Scott do every week.
Thank you very much. It's funny because we have listeners say that they hear from us more than they hear from their friends, and they hear from us and they're like, "Oh, they're like my real brother," and it's kind of cool to hear that. So, but thank you. We appreciate how you have been listening to us for 4.5 years. Did you start an episode? I think you were in the single digits, weren't you?
I think it was in the single digits. I know I went back and gobbled down the early episodes, so I don't think it was too shortly after y'all started.
That's right. Yeah, you've been with us for 4.5 years, and from Scott and I, we thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing me to make my podcast debut. This has been a blast.
Thank you very much. It's been a joy talking to you. And we'll definitely be talking. We've got some more figures and WCW themes to talk about.
It's a whole world. WCW never died in my head. They're still going on.
Well, next week I might sing, or not sing, but I might read the lyrics to Steinerized.
Oh, that's a great song. Yeah. The one, if I can say, when you have a moment, grab the lyrics for Ricky Steamboat's Family Man song.
Ooh. Which,
if you don't remember it is his theme song. It has kind of an elevator, soft rock kind of vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about how he doesn't cheat on his wife on the so
you're definitely giving fuel for the podcast.
It's a great song, trust me, especially when you realize how messy his divorce was. Definitely check it out. The lyrics are absolutely amazing. That whole album is a work of genius.
I will definitely do that. I'm reading some lyrics for the next few weeks. Can definitely say that.
Thank you for this quality content.
Well, Erin, I thank you, and you stay safe. And as I said, we'll be talking about horrible WCW themes here shortly.
Brilliant. You too, Jeff. Stay safe.
All right, Erin. Bye.
Hey, bye.
What a fun time talking to Erin and Jeff Palmacio tonight. Just hearing their stories and their backstories, and just hearing everything about their love of wrestling and wrestling figures always brings a smile to my face. So I hope you guys are staying safe. Stay indoors. #FigLife. Adios.
Yeah. FullyPoseable. Let's go. Jeff and Scott, the Toon Brothers, busting out the ring, but we don't take it out the box. MOC. Happy toy hunting. We'll see you next week. We're the OGs of WFP. Fully Poseable, thank you all for listening. It ain't no storyline, real life siblings. So everybody go and do your toy spotting. Hashtag Fig Life, adios from the Kings.